Good morning, everybody. My name's Mallin Martin. I'm a hydrogeologist here at the Coal Authority with our Heat and Bioproduct Innovation team. I do apologise if my voice sounds a little hoarse. It's only just about come back today after a number of days of losing it, much to the joy of my fiance having a quiet household. But I'm sort of back in as full strength today as I can be to tell you a little bit about some of the work we've been doing in our R&D facility as part of our Gateshead Living Lab project. So as Charlotte's quite nicely introduced, we've been supporting Gateshead Council over the past few years to develop their mine water heat scheme, and the Gateshead area of the UK is currently home to not one but two mine water heat schemes, and this is a bit of a unique setting here in the UK in that at the moment there's not necessarily any mine water blocks or mine water settings where there's more than one operator operating at the same time. And one of the asks of our licensing and permitting team here at the Coal Authority is to better understand how we can sustainably support more than one operator within the same hydrogeological unit or mine water block. Ultimately, we want to see this technology blossom here in the UK and scale up at a sustainable rate. And we hope that the outcomes of this living lab will better answer and better support some of those decision making going forwards. Not only do we want to see how we can have multiple operators in the same setting and whether that becomes a detriment or a benefit, we also want to explore what happens to the wider mine water setting when we sort of stress it under commercial conditions or sort of operational conditions. We hope that this kind of facility will add on or supplement some of the work that our esteemed colleagues at the British Geological Survey are doing with their Glasgow Geoenergy Observatories, which operates in a much more controlled fashion, whereas we are only monitoring what happens when we have real world operators up and running. And ultimately the data that we collect from this facility will be out there in the public for the research community to interrogate and support their investigations going forwards as well. So for a bit of context, Gateshead is, and I can see we wanted somebody with a laser pointer asking. So here we are in the UK here. Gateshead up is in the northeast of England. I can assure you it is mostly cold and wet for the best part of the year, but it can also reach a nice balmy 35 degrees, as I've experienced last year. The Living Lab is situated between both the Gateshead District Heat Network, which is located in this part of Gateshead, and then we have the Lanchester Wine Scheme, which is located in this part of Gateshead, and the Gateshead network, the Gateshead Living Lab, will be situated in this setting. We have up to 4 locations to choose from at the moment. We will only be picking 3. We've been currently drilling at our A5 location here over the past few weeks, which sort of leads me on to what we've been doing to date. So the Living Lab will consist of up to 5 boreholes, 3 boreholes into the Hutton workings, which form the basis of some of the key targets for the Gateshead mine water heat scheme, and possibly for Lanchester Wines. But if not, I'm aware that the high main workings are also a key target for both sets of schemes. Our Hutton boreholes will be fully instrumented with a number of sensors, whilst our high main monitoring boreholes will be much more simple groundwater monitoring holes. The Hutton boreholes will be installed with both fibre optic cables for distributed temperature sensing measurements and vibrating wire piezometers and thermistors, coupled with data loggers that will be operating over a longer duration. The DTS fibres will only be for spot measurements, as we don't necessarily have the space or capacity to install the permanent DTS monitoring facility, but it's something that we can certainly, we wanted to make sure we future-proof this installation as much as possible going forwards. All boreholes will be fitted with submersible data loggers to collect information on level, temperature and conductivity for the duration of the monitoring. So far to date, we've had a number of different activities. We've collected some initial groundwater samples as part of the Gateshead pump testing that we hope to use as a very rudimentary baseline before everybody goes into full-scale production. And we hope that once we have installed our Gateshead Living Lab infrastructure, we will be able to collect more samples to characterize the groundwater quality going forwards. And then really over the last couple of weeks, thanks to our the support of our contractors drill corps, we've been drilling at our first site to try and encounter our first targets. I've also had the chance to get some of our vibrating wire piezometers calibrated and ready. But on the whole, it's been good progress. We've had various weather conditions, as would be expected, drilling throughout a British winter and spring. And we're getting there. We're currently on our second hole. Our first borehole, unfortunately, did not encounter the target we were hoping for in the Hutton, but we may be able to salvage it and turn it into one of our shallow monitoring holes for this site. We are currently drilling our second borehole at this site to try and prove the Hutton target at this location. And that kind of does lead on quite nicely into some of the challenges that we faced here. I think, like Charlotte mentioned, and you may have seen from previously, the age of some of these plans can be 1700s, 1800s, maybe through to early 1900s. But the quality of georeferencing and some element of artistic license when having constructed these plans leads to some challenges in ensuring that we are over the target. I think that leads back in quite nicely to a question that was asked of Florian earlier at the start. The benefit sometimes of working with more modern plans is that you can assure your targets, but we can certainly say in this case, working with much older plans does lead to a great number of challenges in hitting our targets first time. But because Gateshead is so thoroughly worked, we're sure that we will hit something eventually. And of course, drilling through such an extensively mined setting over and encountering a number of levels of mine workings, we have had some challenges and delays faced with the drilling in order to sort of seal up these workings as we encounter them, to try and make sure that the fiber optics and vibrating wires have full contact with the environment around them. We are grouting the mine workings as we go to try and maintain flush and retain and get us down to target. But the first hole is always the hardest. We've taken a number of lessons learned in our drilling technique and approach, and we're hopefully going to deploy these with greater success for our next borehole. And really, that leads on quite nicely to our next steps. At this stage, the Living Lab, it doesn't really have much meat to it. We can only cross our fingers and hope that we get all the drilling completed, and then we can get round to the more exciting part of collecting the data from the final installed boreholes and facility. And then ultimately, with the support of my colleagues here at the Coal Authority and my support of Fiona Todd, we will hopefully get access to this data set up and released into the wild so that we can all explore this and look at how we can scale up this mine water heat industry across the UK in the most sustainable and economical fashion possible. And thank you very much for listening. Should anybody have any questions about the Gateshead Living Lab, please don't hesitate to get in touch and feel free to email us at minewaterheat@coal.gov.uk. And thank you very much.